Yeah, I'm very interested with the what Brian just mentioned. How you have a vision in your mind. You know, people like it. They've been interviewing other people, but how do you translate that to a different audience with maybe a different set of motivation so that they can perceive what you want to convey? What kind of advice do you have for other founders that are about to do that?
I think, the set of to be able to communicate, have people understand what it is that you're building, you have to kind of really get them into the mind of your customer and help them understand. Because here's the thing that a lot of people think VCs know everything about everything. And it turns out VCs know very little about your problem. In fact, you know your problem 100 times better than any VC is ever going to. A VC is going to be looking at a startup that looks like ours and then one that's completely different in the same half an hour, right? So you have to do a good job of educating them of why this is a problem, why this is the biggest problem, why you should build $1 billion company to solve it. And you have to not only have the conviction, but you have to have the, really, really nail the why. Like, why does Orgspace exist? It exists because there is an unmet need in the industry that software leaders actually have to do most of the planning around who goes on what team. So get back to Brian's example, there are a lot of folks in the industry that aren't in the industry that to them, that's like, really? That's how it works? Tell me more. That's a really fascinating thing. And so being able to convert that to thinking about, well, imagine, I know Brian hates sports analogies, but I'll use one anyway. Would you use HR to staff the Chicago Bulls? No, you would not.
I have no idea. How do you?
I had to I gasped. I was like, oh, that would be a horrible team.
You just wouldn't, right? Nobody would ever think about that, right? So, think about it. So if you can figure out, and again, maybe it's a dumb analogy, maybe it's not, but like, you have to kind of figure out a way to communicate either by analogy or some other kind of way to help people understand your problem. And I think, to some folks that analogy might work, but like, yeah, that's my answer to that question. Like you have to figure out a way to help them understand it in very plain terms and very efficiently.
I would sort of characterize it almost like I hate to say the word sales process, right? But like you are trying to find a framework for conveying why the thing that you care about matters to someone else, right? In the simplest or the most general terms. And so as part of that process, I mean, I find it very valuable to be honest, right? I certainly, I think to me, a core principle here is like, I don't do bombast really. Maybe this is like an East Coast versus West Coast thing or something. Also, like I'd been coming out of working for WeWork, and I'd had a little much of the exaggeration, I suppose. But I think it was really important to me that we be upfront and clear and direct in how we planned on communicating what we were doing. But that certainly does not preclude emphasizing the pieces that we think are most relevant or compelling to the audience that you're working with. And that's not just pitching to VCs. That's, giving a good talk or trying to build good marketing or working in sales or something. The important thing for me to remember is that most people don't care all that much. Like, you are selling something that is of interest, but only if it fits through the lens that they're using to understand what they're doing. We got a lot of, oh, well, it's not an industry that we're into, or we have a similar portfolio company or whatever. And I try to take all that stuff on face value, right? Through that lens of they are trying to apply a set of constraints to a meaningful problem. If you're not compelling enough, there's some bar that you're failing to exceed, or maybe simply that on face value, there's something about the business that falls out of those parameters, right? So fair enough. Fun conversation. Thanks for your time. Try again, right? Just keep on iterating.
I do think founder or VCs properly want to see if you can sell the idea. Because you're going to have to sell it to them before you can sell it to any customer or anybody else that's going to be out in the world and give you money for your product.
The framework you laid out, Brian, makes me think that it was a good way to become resilient to the no's of like taking those things for face value. I think one of the things you mentioned very early on in our conversation was a lot of folks may not get back to you in a long time, or you may get initial interest and they may ghost you. And so I was wondering if you had any remarks on how to get past that, like probably the emotional experience of like, why are they ignoring me? It's been a long time. And I guess emotionally, how do you get past that? And then tactically, what's the next move to keep moving forward?
I don't know. I'll take a quick stab at this and then pass it to you, Aaron. I think the mistake I made in retrospect was to rely too much on the person getting back to me, that they would eventually get back to me. And instead, what I should have done is not over-indexed on that particular individual just kept going, right? We had a really positive, strong hit from someone in our professional network early on that got us both excited. And then after a couple conversations, just nothing. That put us in the back foot for a little while. In retrospect, what I should have just said is like, until it's a yes, it's not a yes. Don't take it at face value. Just keep on having those conversations, keep on moving forward. And sorry, with that, I'll pass it over to you, Aaron.
One of the most interesting things I think that happened in our fundraising process was, we initially got our first conversation in Bloomberg Beta through one colleague who had made some, kind of an introduction through a mutual. We had that conversation, heard very little for about 7 weeks, had another conversation with somebody else who also happened to know the same partner at Bloomberg Beta. And so we heard about it from a second person. So my very concrete advice is, if you can figure out a way to get to a VC through two different parts of your network, that might be a way to get there. I don't know. It worked for us, so obviously it's going to work for everybody else, right? No, I don't know if it'll work for everybody else, but it does kind of provide, sometimes they need that social proof, or they need to kind of see it a couple times. And if they were kind of warm to the idea, but not like, I'm going to do this, and they hear it from somebody else, that could be a winning formula to actually get the thing done.
I can imagine getting a message from two completely disparate sources saying, "Hey, you should check this out," and I'd be like, "Yeah, I actually should definitely check that out." I think that's great.
Another aspect I want to throw out there is that it's possible that among other investors in the world, they're just going to be a big portion of them just doesn't care or doesn't know about, passionate about your product. That's probably applies to every company. So it's totally okay if you just go past those people and find the right ones, the ones that they're really interested in your product. So that's probably, I'm not sure, that's my perspective, but happy to hear your perspective on that as well, and see if that is the case.
I think I'd give us mixed marks in that regard. Like, I think one thing that I was really passionately committed to early on is that we should be methodical about this, right? Let's go find every VC that seems relevant to the segment that we're targeting in the industry and like go reach out to them directly. And to Aaron's point earlier, I don't know, we did a little bit of that, but I don't know that in the end, a lot of that cold outreach got us where we needed to go. Mostly it was activating one or two key people who got it and got excited about the idea, and then them reaching out to their network and saying, "Hey, you should check this out." I think so. It came in through that vector, and I think the person who was most important to us actually wasn't in either of our networks to begin with. We met him as part of the journey, and it was Timothy Chen in my mind that we spent a ton of time with him, just walking him through it and talking through the parameters, and like at the end of it, he was like, "I'm in your camp. Let me know how I can help." And from that point forward, he was super helpful. And that's been true, I think, of a lot of our angels. Is like once someone is conceptually or emotionally committed, they tend to be really helpful. Or at least I feel extremely fortunate in that that's been our journey so far. The other thing I think that was meaningful for us was that we are likewise very fortunate in that the software that we're targeting is geared towards software leaders, and a lot of software leaders who've had remunerative careers do angel investing. And so occasionally, simply as part of talking through our networks, we'd pop into someone who's like, "I see it, I totally get it. Are you interested in taking on an investor?" So I would say angel was comparatively pretty straightforward for us. It was institutional investment and bridging the gap between those two things that was more tricky.